So let's get to it. Why Trump's rare earth deal with Ukraine doesn't make sense. The TLDR of it, even though this is literally TLDR, is that a lot of the minerals that Donald Trump is talking about is either directly inside of illegally annexed Russian territory now, inside of Ukraine, or very close to it. So how is he going to do extractions with American companies? I guess that is, the only way to do that is by basically dealing with Russia directly and picking apart Ukraine and Ukrainian soil piece by piece with Russia.
Over the last few days, US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have had a pretty public falling out, with Trump calling Zelensky a dictator and Zelensky accusing Trump of living in a Russian disinformation space. Until recently, it was widely assumed that this was a consequence of the meeting between American and Russian officials in Saudi Arabia earlier this week. But while that meeting obviously didn't help, in the last few days there has been some suggestion that quite a lot of Trump and Zelensky's falling out has actually been about a prospective mineral deal that would see the US get preferential access to Ukraine's mineral reserves. On Thursday, Axios claimed that the US and Ukraine fell out after Zelensky refused to sign the original deal. And a few hours later, Mike Waltz, America's national security advisor, publicly urged Volodymyr Zelensky to take, quote, a hard look at a proposed deal. So in this video, we're going to look at this proposed mineral deal, why it's proved so controversial, and what might happen next. Podcast app. First though, what mineral resources does Ukraine actually have? Well, according to Ukraine's own geological survey, Ukraine has large underground deposits of certain in-demand metals, including titanium, graphite, lithium, and uranium, as well as a handful of rare earth reserves, with all these deposits generally occurring along the so-called Ukrainian Shield, a strip of land that
Russia isn't ideologically against the West. They're just bitter they can't be in the club, that's all. They don't have a strong anti-imperialism conviction. No, I understand that. I agree with you. And I'm pretty sure Vladimir Putin very openly admitted that, where he said, we are capitalists. We're not a socialist nation. We're a capitalist nation. Hello, we are no longer the USSR. Why can't we be your Israel? That was a conversation that took place with Tucker Carlson when he went over there to be like, when he went over there to be like, look at the beautiful metro stations Stalin built, and also, look, Russians eat burger every day, and it's actually better than American burger, which was, I think, the highest stage of like pro-Russian propaganda that anyone can ever engage in, to claim that Russian burgers are better than American burgers. Like, I don't know how Tucker Carlson is still seen as a patriot after that one. Okay, I wouldn't say that, and everybody thinks I'm an anti-American radical terrorist. Regardless, they're only against the West in terms of Western values, woke hoss rage. Yeah, I think that it is pretty obvious that post-USSR, post-collapse of the USSR, like Russia would have loved the opportunity to be a part of the American periphery. They would have loved to be a Western-aligned. You are whatever is trending. Yeah, it's super trendy to be someone who's critical of American foreign policy. You get rewarded a lot for that sort of thing. Famously, it's great to be anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian. It's so trendy. It was so trendy that I've been doing it for 10 years now. No one ever has a fucking answer for why I maintained these positions over the course of a decade. Cool. Leftism, super trendy. Hey, have you looked outside? There's a literal fascist coup going on in the current government. What the fuck do you mean leftism is pretty trendy? Anyway.
Runs along the right bank of the Dnipro River. However, these deposits have not undergone any significant exploration or development. For instance, Ukrainian officials claim some of the world's largest deposits of titanium, used for missiles, planes and ships, but only 10% of its proven reserves are being developed. So why haven't these reserves been developed? Well, it's at least in part because during the Soviet and much of the post-Soviet era, Ukraine didn't receive enough investment. Then in the 2010s, when Ukraine began drawing up plans for it, offering outside investors tax breaks and investment rights, including a major oil and gas privatization effort in 2013, these efforts were interrupted by Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. Then in 2017, Ukraine launched a new energy strategy to accelerate the licensing of mineral extractions. But Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022 again got in the way. Anyway, Ukraine's unexplored mineral wealth has apparently drawn Trump's attention, and Ukraine and the US are now negotiating some sort of deal that would give American companies privileged access to these deposits. The New York Times actually reported that Ukraine actually refused to sign a mining deal with Biden, so they could use it as leverage over Trump. And originally, it looked like this strategy had worked. Earlier this month, Trump seemed to imply that he'd be happy to continue supporting Ukraine in exchange.
I'm losing my mind at the foreign policy. I'm losing my mind at the brilliant foreign policy administration, the last one, of course. Why are you so mad at life while being rich? Because other people are getting screwed over. And I care about it. I care about that sort of thing. The IMF literally called for these minerals to be privatized, which is part of why. Yeah, okay, listen. It was always the case, okay? Hold on. Western forces have always wanted to engage in privatization. Bro can't conceptualize empathy. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue.
For access to its mineral wealth.
Hold on, I'm getting
saying,
a bunch
quote,
of different things that I got to respond
what we're
to.
giving them with their rare earths and other things, and that he expected $500 billion worth of rare earth minerals. Trump's enthusiasm for rare earths specifically is probably related to his anxieties about China. Rare earths are used in a whole load of advanced technologies, but China currently accounts for about 60% of all rare earth mining and about 90% of rare earth processing. However, it seems like the deal collapsed on Wednesday last week, when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent visited Kyiv to sign it off, apparently because Zelensky decided it was too one-sided to get through the Ukrainian parliament, and was disappointed that it wasn't accompanied by any US security guarantees. This would be consistent with a slightly astonishing report from The Telegraph earlier this week, who published parts of the original draft agreement. According to that draft agreement, the US would get 50% of recurring revenues received by Ukraine from extraction of resources, and 50% of the financial value of all new licenses issued to third parties until it had received $500 billion, way more than the $175 billion the US has so far spent on.
Just wait until the states had enough of it. Hopefully they come together. I wish. Okay? I wish for a resurgence of some kind of pan-European movement that will undermine American empire. I just don't think that it will ever happen. And I personally think that it will only happen in the opposite direction that you would want it to. Because if Europe, as we've seen in the German elections, which we're going to be talking about in a second, if Europe basically was like, no, we are maintaining neoliberalism, like America's sliding towards fascism, we're going to combat fascism by holding on to neoliberalism. We are going to be the neoliberal state, okay? That is a terrifying prospect for the future, and I think that's untenable overall. I think that is not, you will inevitably collapse to a fascist movement, and that movement will most likely align either with the growing American fascist movement or maybe even the Russian fascist state. So who knows? Who knows where they would go? But it wouldn't be in the opposite. It wouldn't be in the popular direction. It wouldn't be like a popular mobilization, a popular front to combat fascism. That inevitably goes back to neoliberalism. Inevitably goes back to the destabilization, and then that destabilization creates volatility. Volatility creates larger right-wing fascist movements. So this is just extortion of Ukraine's natural resources, making them give you half of all their money basically indefinitely in exchange for not selling them out, but also probably selling them out anyway. No, there is a tremendous amount of selling out that has taken place the entire step of the way, every step of the way. Okay? Whether it be holding off on weapons transfers initially, like the appropriate weapons that were necessary, whether it be dumping older weapons in general to Ukrainian forces. And then also, as evidenced by even the TLDR summarization of Biden's attempts, there was always an extraction deal on the table. Ukraine just said no to it. So it's not like, remember when I told you there is no difference between Biden and Trump in terms of foreign policy? Trump just says the quiet part out loud. Well, there are some differences in terms of like how much Trump is glazing Vladimir Putin. Absolutely. But if you think that there wasn't some sort of extraction deal on the table that America wanted, you'd be wrong. Clearly, they were also pushing for it, just not aggressively enough, right? Donald Trump, on the other hand, is like, no, we want all of your natural resources. We're going to take 50% of them. There's nothing you can do about it. What the fuck are you going to do about it? This is cope? I don't think this is cope. I think this is just the truth. It does not matter. American foreign policy is uniparty, and it only goes in one direction. Right wing.
On Ukraine. But this agreement wouldn't just cover metal reserves. It also covered oil and gas, ports, and, quote, other infrastructure.
I'm willing to bet that Trump has expanded on the previous administration's negotiations, though, if that makes sense. Like, that's why I say American foreign policy only goes in one direction. And when Republicans come in, they push it even further to the right. And then the Democrats don't actually claw back. Democrats don't actually claw back any of the rightward shift that the previous administration put in place. Look at the Abraham Accords under the Trump administration, for example. Look at the Iran denuclearization agreement that fell apart, and then the Democrats never actually picked it back up. As another example, annexation of the Golan Heights, or the recognition of annexed territory in the Golan Heights. Another example, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Another example. Most of these are Israel-related, obviously, including the Iran one. But the Biden administration didn't actually go back on any of that. Why didn't they go back on any of that? Because they're not, it's uniparty. Liberals like it when the Republicans basically push the needle. They when they really get more aggressive in terms of foreign policy, seemingly, because they never claw it back. They never actually go back to a return to normalcy or decency. Here's another example of this. Barack Obama. Barack Obama came into office on an anti-Iraq war ticket. Okay? He says he's going to fix the housing market crash. He's going to fix the American economy, and he's going to basically go back on the Bush-era war on terror policies. Did he do that? No, he did a literal troop surge in Iraq. Okay? He never closed Gitmo. Gitmo's still in operation. Guantanamo Bay is still very much in operation. He greatly expanded on drone warfare, okay, including extrajudicious killings of American citizens. So yeah, that is another great example of how liberals, even if they promise certain things, actually end up not doing those things and continue escalating conflicts around the world. Obama, on the other hand, did do some interesting stuff, I will admit, in terms of the Iran denuclearization agreement and also starting the normalization process with Cuba. Those two things were absolutely glaringly obvious W's for Barack Obama. Donald Trump immediately came in and cast all of that aside. And guess who came after Donald Trump and didn't actually fix it? His name is Joseph Robinette Brandon. Okay? So there it is.
As agreed. The US would also get to decide who got those licenses and the terms of any future projects, with the draft also stating that, quote, the agreement shall be governed by New York law, without regard to conflict of laws principles, and that the government of Ukraine waives sovereign immunity with respect to its liability. In short, the US basically gets to control all of Ukraine's extractable mineral wealth and any infrastructure until the country has paid back roughly 3 times what the US has spent in aid, which is why the Telegraph describes it as, quote, the economic colonization of Ukraine in legal perpetuity. Perhaps more importantly, though, it's not clear Ukraine would ever be able to pay off $500 billion, for the simple reason that, while Ukraine has clearly done a great job in advertising its mineral wealth to Trump, there's a fair bit of uncertainty about how much mineral wealth Ukraine actually has. You hear massive numbers being bandied around at the moment. Trump claimed Ukraine had $500 billion in rare earths alone. The New York Times put Ukraine's total mineral wealth at $11.5 trillion, while the Washington Post put it at an astonishing $26 trillion. But to be totally honest, none of these numbers seem remotely plausible. While it's true that Ukraine has pretty substantial lithium and titanium reserves, neither of these metals are really that expensive. The price of lithium has fallen by more than 80% in the past 2 years, for instance. It's not even clear Ukraine is that well endowed when it comes to rare earths. While the Ukrainian Geological Survey claims some rare earth deposits in Ukraine, the US Geological Survey doesn't list Ukraine as having any reserves of the 15 key rare earth elements. In fact, the former director of the Ukraine Geological Survey said recently that there has been no modern assessment of rare earth reserves in Ukraine, and estimates were based on old Soviet-era studies. This speaks to a more general truth about rare earths. Contrary to what the name suggests,
So what happens if it's not there? So then Ukraine is just cooked for no reason? I mean, they're already cooked for no reason. Even if there are rare earth minerals there and they extract it, it's not like Ukraine is getting a piece of that. It is truly insane that America can so openly talk about basically stealing all of Ukraine's natural resources, or worse, talking to the invading force, the invading nation, about, doing a little split with Ukraine. That is America's foreign policy. Like, they're talking to Russia and going, yeah, we're going to take some of this you can take as well. And, what a great deal for us. Now, of course, it's not a first. Yes, you're right. It's not a first. This is American foreign policy. I'm just shocked at how out in the open it is, because Donald Trump, as always, is the great communicator.
not actually that rare geologically. The issue is mainly that...
Does this undeniably make Russia an imperialist? Russia and its irredentist actions already Russia is a right-wing, ultra-nationalist, capitalist kleptocracy. They're not the USSR, okay? They're just straightforwardly trying to bring back, to the best of their ability, Russian Empire. I think it's truly crazy how much America has benefited from this. It really is. I mean, goddamn, dude. And it is extra wild that Donald Trump is doing this out in the open. Like, no secrets at all. What is this? He's about to farm you? Who? Vladimir Poo? Asmongold is talking about you right now? Oh, nice. Another person who is going to have some fantastic political takes, I suspect.
Their extraction is severely polluting, and their value is massively overhyped. According to Bloomberg's Javier Blas, the value of all the world's rare earth production at best rounds to $15 billion a year, a fraction of the value of annual global oil or copper output. To reach the $500 billion mooted by Trump, the US would need to secure 150 plus years of Ukrainian output. So, if Ukraine doesn't really have trillions of dollars of mineral wealth, what's Zelensky doing talking it up? Well, some Ukrainian officials have come out to say that Zelensky talked up Ukraine's mineral riches to curry favour with Trump, but also in an attempt to draw American companies and capital into Ukraine, which would give Trump an incentive to take Ukraine's security more seriously. Whether this strategy works or ends up with Ukraine turning into an American economic colony remains uncertain. Either way, this all demonstrates a transactional attitude towards alliances under Trump, which doesn't bode well for Ukraine.